House Speaker Greg Stumbo has made the case for Democrats continuing their control of that chamber of the legislature. And joining us now with a Republican perspective is the House Minority Whip, John Carney. He is from Campbellsville, a Republican. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it very much.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to be here today, sir.
And how would things be different in Frankfort and in this state if Republicans were able to gain control of the State House of Representatives?
Well, Mr. Bryan, thanks for the opportunity for the chance to be on and lay out some of the issues that we want to address. First off, it would be different by, we commit to the folks of the citizens of the Commonwealth that we will not be afraid to take on the difficult issues. You have Speaker Stumbo and his leadership team with over 100 years of experience combined. Been 93 years since the House has been under Democrat control, and we feel like they have not taken on the difficult issues that need to be taken on, and we're prepared to do that. And
you identify those issues as what?
Well, obviously jobs is one. You know, August unemployment numbers, seasonally adjusted, were 7.1%. You look at the surrounding states around us, Kentucky's per capita income is the second lowest of all of our border states, with only West Virginia below us. In the last 10 years, we have created less jobs than any state, any of our border states besides West Virginia. Those are not things that Kentucky should be proud of. You know, we're a sports state, obviously, and I know this is UK territory, but there's also Louisville fans here. And if John Calipari or Rick Pitino or Mark Stoops or any of these coaches had the record that this House leadership team had on creating jobs and other things, which basically puts us in the bottom third of the SEC, you would say, I think we all know what the fan base would be demanding. That would be change, and we're here to offer folks that change.
You weren't here to hear the Speaker Stumbo, but he also used a sports metaphor and said that your plan, and I think the plan is called, what, Handshake with Kentucky?
Yes, sir.
Is some sort of roadmap to Alabama, as he was saying, to states that he says do not perform as well as Kentucky.
And the Speaker is very good at since he's such a good defense attorney, at twisting things around somewhat. But it's the issue is not where we get some of our ideas from. The issue really is, again, the failed policy of this leadership team. The proof is that many of these states that we are taking ideas from, are getting ideas from, particularly in job creation, are doing extremely well. One part of our handshake with Kentucky is right-to-work legislation. You know, Tennessee and Indiana and surrounding states that have right-to-work legislation are attracting jobs at a far higher rate than we are, and the Speaker knows that to be true. And they want to spin it as anti-union. Well, I'm a member of the KEA, so it's not anti-union. We want to give folks the option to choose, the freedom to choose, so you're not punished if you decide not to, because it's proven to attract jobs. So that's part of our handshake with Kentucky. The handshake with Kentucky basically is a platform that has been vetted from many states, not just Alabama, but from many states. It's a pro-job creation handshake that we feel like will create jobs, which is what Kentucky needs so desperately. You know, we're looking at it. It involves many aspects. It's right to work is one. It also involves tax reform. We've mentioned that. You know, those are issues that this leadership team have been afraid to take on.
Let me ask you this, and it's a conundrum that I mentioned to you, and I asked the same to him, as pointed out to the Speaker. Polls indicate that voters accept the signature position of each party, in that they seem to approve a hike in the minimum wage, and they approve of a right-to-work law for the state. Now, what about voters who are out there who might say, well, why don't they just work together on some issues like that, and instead of constantly retreating to partisan positions?
And that's a great question by the voters, and our message is one that we hope and we feel like will reach out to conservative Democrats and independents and Republicans. Make no mistake, this is not your grandfather's Democratic Party. And my grandfather, one of my grandfathers, was a Democrat. And this is not his party, or at least the leadership is not his party, and they control the agenda. And on these issues that you just discussed, the poll that you all were part of, I think, basically showed the numbers very much the same. Well, if you look behind that poll, though, the trend for right-to-work legislation statewide is increasing. The trend, as people begin to understand more about minimum wage the issue, those numbers tend to be decreasing somewhat. You know, it is totally an unfair characteristic to try to say Republicans are not for a fair wage. You know, I really resent that. You know, I come from a family of a hardworking farm family. My parents were both factory workers. We want a living wage for folks, and we believe the best way to do that is to drive competition up for jobs, create jobs, spread the base, and that's part of this Handshake with Kentucky platform.
How do you feel about localities potentially going it alone? Jefferson County talking about increasing a minimum wage on a local level, and then as you know, the minority leader Hoover has said, well, if they do that, then let's have local legislation on these right-to-work issues.
Yeah, I think those are fair discussions to have, and I think that's the key point. We're not sitting here today saying that we have every answer. We have a lot of ideas that have worked in other places. Just because they work somewhere doesn't necessarily mean they're going to work in Kentucky. But what we are willing to do, something that this administration has not done for 93 years. Again, they've had 93 years of control. If they were going to do some of these things, you would think they would have already done them by now. We are committing that we will have those discussions, and we will have up or down votes on these issues that are debatable and are somewhat maybe controversial. That's what we're committing to. We're not saying that we've got every answer out there, but we are committing to the citizens of Kentucky. You deserve answers. You deserve a vote up or down on issues. Let's take the heroin bill. Not to jump off topics, but that's one that's kind of been out there in some ads. Well, the fact is, the leader of that bill, basically former President Pro Tem of the Senate, Katie Stein, that bill passed the Senate early in the session. You know that as well as I do. And laid basically up until the middle of March in committee in the State House, which who controls the agenda there? Speaker Greg Stumbo. And then they finally pass it out of committee, and then they bring it to the floor about an hour before session closes on the 15th, and then they want to try to say Republicans were against passing heroin legislation. Well, let's let the folks know the facts. The Speaker's always good about saying the facts are because of his trial attorneys. The facts are they held that up to an hour before the end of session and tried to run it through with about 20 amendments on it.
If Representative Hoover were to become Speaker of the House and the Republicans were to be in control, would you treat the Democrats as you perceive you have been treated as a minority party?
If we do, I'll go home, because that's not how business needs to be done. Kentucky and its citizens deserve better. They should expect better, and they will get better, because as I mentioned, I don't claim to have all the answers, or our party doesn't. We have a lot of ideas, and we think they're good ideas. We want those ideas to be heard, to be vetted, and then us come together as a 100-person house, 100-member house, that the people of Kentucky expect to work together and come to solutions. So if we treat the minority caucus, if it were the Democrats, the way we've been treated at times, then I personally will go home, because that's not how business should be done.
You have largely mentioned jobs and economic issues here. Would the Republican Party also emphasize social issues if it were to become the majority party?
Well, certainly, you know, and there's been some discussion about the handshake with Kentucky, because really jobs are the key thing. We need to basically attract jobs so that we can expand our revenue. Just came from an A&R meeting yesterday in Paducah, where we're about $90 million short of this last year's estimated receipts, so we're trying to figure out where we're going to do plug those holes. And one of the big reasons for that, obviously there's several. One was the coal severance tax. We know how hard it's been hammered lately, but also is our income tax was down quite a bit. And that shows basically, lack of jobs. 7.1%, I think, was the August numbers for unemployment. So we've got to create jobs. But I think our stance on social issues speaks for itself over the years. We have been there lobbying for pro-life legislation. So even though that was not an emphasis on that handshake with Kentucky, we focused on jobs. You can rest assured that our caucus, if we're in the majority, will address social issues and look at those, particularly right to life.
Do you have particular seats out there that you think you can pick up and win the majority control at this point? Do you predict you'll win, as he predicts that the Democrats will at least be even, if not gain seats?
Well, we are very optimistic. Obviously we're at 46 now, but with redistricting that pitted a couple of sets of Republicans together, we kind of dropped back to 44 when we start. We're very optimistic we're going to gain seats, very optimistic we're going to get to 51. Now, there's a lot of hard work out there. We have targeted seats all over the state. Some are here in this viewing area. Western Kentucky is obviously one where we're really focusing. We've gained seats in West Kentucky the last couple cycles, so certainly we have targeted seats, but I'm not going to really share too much about that because some of that stuff needs to be classified.
If you get it very close, as we saw happen a few years ago in the Senate, are there potential party switchers that you would then try to target and potentially change control of the chamber in that way?
Well, I think everything's on the table. There's certainly potential things to happen. You know, whether or not anybody would switch, you know, I don't know that at this time. I just think that any person, everybody who comes to Kentucky to serve in the House come with the right reasons. They come there with the right intent. The issue is, again, this leadership team has over 100 years combined experience. Speaker Stumbo, 30 years. Speaker Pro Tem Larry Clark, 30 years. Leader Atkins, 27 years. And, you know, they've been there that long. The Democrats have been in control for 93 years in the House. It's time for some fresh, new, bold ideas. And I think some of their members may be thinking the same thing. I can't speak for them, but I think that's certainly a possibility that if things were close, that they may be looking at that opportunity to come across. Because again, in the hallway, the talk is pretty clear. A lot of their members, I think, while they may fall rank and file when it comes time to vote, they're not happy with a lot of issues. They're not happy with a lot of things you see in the news. It's got to be very disappointing to them to have members of their caucus plastered on TV with charges against them for sexual harassment and other things that are very unfortunate. I wouldn't want that to happen to anybody, but the facts are, you know, obviously there's been some concerns about corruption in this administration, and I think it's something that the voters of Kentucky need to look at.
You'll be busy in the next few weeks?
I've been busy for the last 6 months, and I'm sure we're going to be busy in the next few weeks, and enjoying that because, again, this is not for my personal gain. You know, this is my 6th year in the General Assembly. I've got 2 young children, just remarried. My goal is to try to better Kentucky, and that's why I make the comment like before. If we don't work together to better Kentucky, you know, people who know me, I think they know I mean what I say is, you know, I coached basketball for years in this state, and that's kind of why I use that analogy. I love coaching basketball and football. I love what I'm doing in Frankfort, but if we don't follow through with our commitment to work with others and bring these ideas together, then it may be time for me to go home and coach basketball.
Representative John Bam Carney, the House Minority Whip, thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us on.
And